All right, we'll start with a quick update. I'm working on 2 videos right now that will be finished pretty soon, one having to do with individuation and the shadow, and the other covering Nietzsche's master and slave morality, but from the perspective of the Bible. Believe it or not, the Bible, based off of my studies so far, promotes a philosophy that's much closer to master morality than you might expect, although it seems to be balanced more by the morality of love, for example. So, not exactly master morality, but there are pieces of it in there. You'll see what I mean. All right, let's get to it. Work. I'll preface this with a couple quick quotes. First, Nietzsche defines work as a painful means to existence. That is, work is painful, but you have to work if you want to continue to exist. And if you want to help others, like your family, to continue to exist. Jordan Peterson said, if you're going to be successful, you need to be smart, conscientious, and tough. He also said, work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. And if you dare to do the most difficult thing you can conceptualize, your life will work out better than it will if you do anything else. Jung said, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light of meaning in the darkness of mere being. And apparently, he found his meaning in his work, internal and otherwise. Jung's longtime associate Barbara Hanna spoke on Jung's work ethic, saying, Jung had the largest capacity for work I have ever seen in anyone. This hard work led to, as Peterson suggests, great success, both academically and financially. According to a number of sources, he built his net worth to somewhere between $1 and $5 million. Jordan Peterson's net worth is currently an estimated $8 million. Jung's mindset was as follows. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. That's a quote attributed to Carl Jung on the internet. I'm not sure what the source is, what book or letter. Nietzsche observed that most people, the masses, toil daily, and a select few, the masters as he calls them, or the Olympian men in this case, reap the reward, which is the removal from the struggle of existence and the ability to spend their days creating art and producing the world of art as a whole. He said, culture, which is first and foremost a real hunger for art, rests on one terrible premise. In order for there to be a broad, deep, fertile soil for the development of art, the overwhelming majority has to be slavishly subjected to life's necessity in the service of the minority, beyond the measure that is necessary for the individual. At their expense, through their extra work, that privileged class is to be removed from the struggle for existence in order to produce and satisfy a new world of necessities. This truth is the vulture which gnaws at the liver of the Promethean promoter of culture. The misery of men living a life of toil has to be increased to make the production of the world of art possible for a small number of Olympian men. So there you have it. If wealth, psychological health, physical health, relational health, financial health, and career or business health, etc. are motivating factors to you, it's probably a good idea to reinforce the importance of hard work in your mind as much as possible. Diligence. Because when you diligently sow into any one of those areas, you reap the reward. Here's a couple proverbs that cover exactly that. The plans of the diligent bring abundance or profit, and also the hand of the diligent will rule. There's a little Nietzschean master morality for you. So that's your carrot, your positive reinforcement. And here's the opposite end of the spectrum, the latter half of those proverbs, the negative reinforcement. But the lazy hand will be enslaved. And the second half to the plans of the diligent bring abundance or profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. The plans of the diligent bring profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. And that's that. So here's Jordan Peterson on work.
All right, what does my average daily schedule consist of? Well, that's fairly straightforward. I get up around somewhere between 6 and 8, and then I work till 10. As hard as I can, flat out, every single day. So, and I've been doing that with very little variation, although it's been much more extreme in the last year for like since 1985. Like I work I would say 14 hours a day, at least 14 hours a day. And so that's about 100 hours a week. And the time that I don't do that, I spend with friends but mostly with my family. And so, and I work as efficiently as I possibly can. I'm always trying to do everything I can as fast as I possibly can. And I'm accustomed to that because, like I said, I've been doing it for 30 years. So that's my daily schedule. And I don't know even what I would do if I didn't do that. I have this cottage that I go to, although I generally spend time writing up there. And I go swimming with my wife and we go canoeing and I can take a break in that way. But most of the time, if I take a break even up at the cottage, generally what I do is like carpentry and fix the place up. And I don't like to be unoccupied. I have to be occupied doing something productive all the time because otherwise I'm not pleased with myself. And so, and you know, I decided a long time ago that I was going to try to live a hyper efficient and hyper productive life. And so it's been a challenge. It's an enjoyable thing for me to some degree because I'm very interested in trying to figure out how much I can possibly do in the shortest period of time all the time. And that keeps you alert and awake. And
no one can live without a routine. You just forget that. If you guys don't have a routine, I would recommend, like, you get one going because you cannot be mentally healthy without a routine. You need to pick a time to get up. Whatever time you want, but pick one and stick to it because otherwise you dysregulate your circadian rhythms and they regulate your mood. And eat something in the morning. Behavioral psychologists concentrate a lot more on that sort of thing. You know, it's practical. It's like strategizing. Make a career plan. Figure out how to negotiate because that's bloody important. Figure out how to say what you need. Figure out how to tell the truth to people.
Well, I eat a big breakfast relatively soon on waking. That really helps. If so, nap, make sure you eat, and make sure you eat protein and fat and not carbohydrates because carbohydrates are basically poisonous. That's about, and make sure that you get enough sleep. So that's how I combat it and try to make myself hyper efficient, which is also a really interesting thing to try to do as much good possible as efficiently as possible. And that efficiency thing is really fun. If you guys who are listening are out for a challenge, like one of the things that you can, I think this heightens the meaning in your life, is to try to do difficult things, right? Aim high. Don't aim so damn high you can't manage it, and make sure you break down your aims into reasonably attainable sub goals, but you want to aim high, and then you want to see how hyper efficient you can get. That's a great thing to do in your early 20s, is to see, okay, like discipline yourself. You think, okay, how much work can I do if I load myself right to the maximum? How far can I work? How hard can I work until I exhaust myself? And then you back off, obviously, because the optimal amount of working, productive engagement, let's say, is that which is sustainable across decades. So you have to learn that, but you don't learn that without stretching yourself to your limits to begin with. And you know, if your life isn't everything it could be, and if you're suffering from an excess of meaninglessness, well, it means you're not oriented in the world of chaos and order properly. It's like you could learn to discipline yourself. Figure out what it is that you need to do and that you want to do, and then see how efficient you can get. Because one of the things that's quite fun is to figure out, if you have a task, I always tell my graduate students this if they're doing an experiment too. If you have a task that you have to do, it's really interesting to spend a few minutes, sometimes hours, depending on how long the task is, see if you can figure out how to do it from 5 to 10 times faster. It means you'll have to rearrange the way you think about it, but you can often do it. And that's how extremely productive people get so hyper efficient. You know, sometimes it means you have to delegate. Sometimes it means you have to bring other people aboard. That's delegation as well, I suppose. But there's a lot of preconceptions that you hold about who you are and who the world is that you could dispense with that would make you a way more efficient actor in the world. And so, all right, so that's that. And so, like, left to my own devices, I would just work all the time.
Yep.
And there are lots of people like that.
I could get a key and just lock you in there.
Yeah. Well, we kind of did that in my office because we learned.
No, I learned.
You go ahead. You can tell that story.
When you went to work, you didn't want to be interrupted, so I didn't interrupt you. So you could be there for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, and then I'm kind of fascinated by how you can do as much as possible in the shortest possible period of time. And that's always kind of a game for me, and that's associated with industriousness. I like to work. I would work all the time, pretty much. I'm getting better at leavening that with recreation, especially artistic recreation. And I like to spend time with your mom and you guys. So that those were good breaks. Well, I also trained myself when I was especially in graduate school, to really work. I wanted to see
How much?
I spent like 5 years pushing the limits of my ability to work. And then I figured out how to pull back a little bit from that because I was exhausted. I think when you're young, it's really useful for about 2 years or 3 years to work yourself to the point of exhaustion, to find out where that limit is and then dial back. And when you're young, you can kind of stand it because you're healthy as long as you don't drink too much, etc. But it's really useful to test that out. These career-obsessed people, they tend to be extremely high in industriousness, and it's a precondition for extreme success in most endeavors.
Yeah. It's like a game, right? It's like a contest.
It's a contest, yeah, especially if you're a little disagreeable too.
And I would, I think about this because I'll tell you what it is that you need to do to be successful. Some of these things aren't so malleable, but others are things that you can work on. Well, IQ, well, that's a rough one because there's no evidence, as far as I can tell, that you can do a damn thing about your IQ. I can tell you how to stop your IQ from decreasing as you get older. That's not so bad because it does that. Fluid IQ decreases from the time you're 20 and pretty rapidly. It's physical health is the best preventative. So exercise, physical exercise. Weirdly enough, you think, well, why? Well, your brain uses oxygen like mad, right? And it needs to be kept clean and well oxygenated. And physical exercise, both like weightlifting, so anaerobic and aerobic exercise both seem to be very, very effective at staving off cognitive declines across the lifespan. So that's a really useful thing to know because that's the only thing we know that does that. So then the next best predictor of lifetime success is conscientiousness. Well, so, and of the two aspects of conscientiousness, say orderliness and industriousness, the better predictor is industriousness. So the question is, well, what can you do about your industriousness? And the answer to that is, well, that's kind of rough too, because there's a strong genetic component. But you can work on micro habits with regards to your conscientiousness. And I think the best micro habits, this is partly to do with this future authoring program processes, I think the best thing you can do with regards to your conscientiousness is to set up some aims for yourself, goals that you actually value. And the future authoring program helps people do that. And basically, it does a situational analysis it helps you do a situational analysis of your life more than a psychological analysis, I would say. And so the questions are something like, well, all right, you're going to have to put some effort into your life. And you need to be motivated to do that. And so what are the potential sources of motivation? Well, you could think about them in the big five manner. If you're extroverted, you want friends. If you're agreeable, you want an intimate relationship. If you're disagreeable, you want to win competitions. If you're open, you want to engage in creative activity. If you're high in neuroticism, you want security. Okay, so those are all sources of potential motivation that you could draw on, that you could tailor to your own, your own personality. But then there are dimensions that you want to consider your life across. And so we ask people about, well, if you could have your life the way you wanted it in 3 to 5 years, if you were taking care of yourself properly, what would you want from your friendships? What would you want from your intimate relationship? How would you like to structure your family? What do you want for your career? Well, how are you going to use your time outside of your job? And how are you going to regulate your mental and physical health, and maybe also your drug and alcohol use? Because that's a good place to auger down, because alcoholism, for example, wipes out, 5 to 10% of people. So you want to keep that under control. And then so maybe you develop a vision of what you would like your life to be, and that associates the goal. Well, once the goal is established, and then you break down the goal into micro processes that you can implement, the micro processes become rewarding in proportion, in relation to their causal association with the goal, and that tangles in your incentive reward system. We talked about the dopaminergic incentive reward system, and that's the thing that keeps you moving forward. And the way it works is that it works better if it produces positive emotion when it can see you moving towards a valued goal. Okay, well, what's the implication of that? Better have a valued goal, because otherwise you can't get any positive motivation working out. And so the more valuable the goal, in principle, the more the micro processes associated with that goal start to take on a positive charge. And so what that means is, well, you get up in the morning and you're excited about the day, you're ready to go. And so as far as I can tell, what you do is you specify your long-term ideal. Maybe you also specify a place you want to stay the hell away from, so that you're terrified to fail as well as excited about succeeding, because that's also useful. You specify your goal. You do that in some sense as a unique individual. You want to specify goals that make you say, oh, if that could happen as a consequence of my efforts, it would clearly be worthwhile. Because the question always is, why do something? Because doing nothing is easy. You just sit there and you don't do anything. That's real easy. The question is, why would you ever do anything? And the answer to that has to be because you've determined by some means that it's worthwhile. And then the next question might be, well, where should you look for worthwhile things? And one would be, well, you could consult your own temperament. And the other would be, well, you kind of look at what it is that people accrue that's valuable across the lifespan. So you do a structural analysis of the subcomponents of human existence, and I already did that. You need a family, you need friends. Like, you don't need to have all these things, but you better have most of them. Family, friends, career, educational goals, plans for, time outside of work, attention to your mental and physical health, etc. That's what life is about. And if you don't have any of those things, well, then all you've got left is misery and suffering. So that's a bad deal for you. So once you set up that goal structure, let's say, and that's really in many ways that's what you should be doing at university. That's exactly what you should be doing, is trying to figure out who it is that you're trying to be, right? And you aim at that, and then you use everything you learn as a means of building that person that you want to be. And I really mean want to be. I don't mean should be, even those things are going to overlap. And it's important to distinguish between those, because that's partly, and this is back down to the micro-routine analysis. So if I was saying, well, you're going to try to make yourself more industrious. Okay, number one, specify your damn goals, because how are you going to hit something if you don't know what it is? That isn't going to happen. And often people won't specify their goals too, because they don't like to specify conditions for failure. So if you keep yourself all vague and foggy, which is real easy, because that's just a matter of not doing as well, then you don't know when you fail. And people might say, well, I really don't want to know when I fail, because that's painful. So I'll keep myself blind about when I fail. That's fine, except you'll fail all the time then. You just won't know it until you've failed so badly that you're done. And that can easily happen by the time you're 40. I would recommend that you don't let that happen.